Hey guys, it's me, Yolanda Grace Blasia. I want you guys to go to my YouTube channel, click like and subscribe. I'm trying to build up my audience, but I will be releasing videos once a week on my social media platforms. But I would really appreciate it if you guys went over to YouTube and really started subscribing, because I have all kinds of videos, whether they're music, crafts for the kids, business topics, or just like general topics for well-being and coping, especially during these times. Okay, I love you guys. Thank you for watching. And make sure you guys tag me and show me your beautiful designs. And here's some of the bracelets that I've custom designed. Some for myself and one for my son. For my advanced bead makers and jewelry makers, please watch at the ends, and then you will see how to fasten one of these clasps. I got some beads from the dollar store. You can even buy more elaborate beads such as these at your local craft store. I've also had old jewelry that I've just like taken apart, and I've used crystals and beads from those. Today we're gonna let the little ones join in, and we're gonna make this today. I'm just gonna put a bead on here like this, tie it off with just one knot, so that way they won't fall off. Then I am going to hold this, and I'm going to put it around my wrist, and I'm going to snip it off with my scissors. It's gonna be a little bit loose because at the end when we tie it, we're going to cut off the extra string. Whether you're using an elastic or you're using something like this, you're going to want to leave extra room. You don't want to start out with something too little, kind of like this, and then it won't work out for you. All we're gonna do is just start putting beads on one at a time, and then we're gonna make a pattern. If the beads the hole isn't big enough, then you can just use a tool, a pencil or something, and make sure that it becomes opened enough for you to fit the string through the bead. And do that over and over again. So there can be many reasons why people make jewelry, and I want to let you guys know that men and boys can make jewelry too. Some of them are the most beautiful jewelry makers, and people all over the world have created the most beautiful patterns with beads. They've made them into necklaces, bracelets. They've adorned their clothes with them, hair, and they can be all types of meanings behind them, whether they represent a culture or a custom. The colors of the beads, the sizes of the beads can tell a story, kind of like how quilting does. And some of those stories can be from inside of yourself, like a friendship bracelet. Some people use beads in their prayers, and some people use beads as just a very nice, fun craft. Titi Yola, myself, when I get sometimes just overwhelmed, I like to do crafts and beads because they help me feel really calm. And then in the end, when I have something beautiful, it makes me really happy. I want you guys to all know all these different reasons and meanings behind jewelry making and what beading can be. The other materials that I have would be some wire, which I don't really like the wire too much. You get a stronger hold, but they can break and they're not as dangly as when you use this. It's kind of like a fishing wire or a fishing line, but it's way more flexible than using the wire. So in my experience, I decided I like that. And I like this elastic too, because that's how you can make like the tight to your wrist ones, and you don't need a clasp. So if you want to get creative, you can add, let's just add a fancy bead in here. And there's, for my more advanced jewelry makers, there's so many other more advanced techniques, but since I'm making a video for the kids, I'm just gonna keep it really simple today. So I'll add one shiny one in there. I hope everyone is doing great, feeling great, and ready to get creative. Sometimes I've dropped a whole string of beads and they fell everywhere and I was so frustrated. But it is what it is. I just have to start all over again. And the more practice you have, the more used to handling the beads and stringing the beads, and the faster you'll get. So this looks good to me. I can close this well. What I'm going to do, see how this is stretchable? I'm going to hold this tight. I'm going to take my first bead that I had put a knot in, and I'm going to untie that knot and loosen that back up. I'm going to scooch these down a little bit so they're kind of in the middle, and your mom or dad might have to help you with this part. And then I'm going to tie a knot, like when I'm tying my shoes. I'm not going to tie it super tight where I'm stretching the rubber band. I'm just going to tie it enough to where it closes it. And then I'm going to tie it again, one more knot. And I'm actually going to do it one more time, a third knot. Boom. I'm going to take my scissors, and this is what I was talking about. And I'm going to trim these off. And now I have a bracelet. Okay, for my more advanced jewelry makers, let's go ahead and step it up a notch. We're going to use this right here, which is some fine monofilament cord. We're going to use our crimp tubes, and we are going to be using lobster clasps and these little jewelry rings. Okay, there's also magnetic clasps, and there's all types of other fashionable clasps available at the hobby store. If you were making a cord jewelry set, you could use this, but for today we are going to be using lobster clasps and jewelry rings. So I also like to kind of lay out my pattern so that way, you know, I don't get too overwhelmed or confused. But beading is such a creative process. There's no rules to it. I'm just showing you some of the techniques that you can use. Number one, for most people's wrists, a female's wrist would be 7 inches and a man's wrist would be 8 inches. So you're going to want to cut your string about 8 inches for a female or 9 inches for a male, so you have a little slack. So, and if you don't want to go by inches, you can just wrap it around your wrist first and then like add an inch more so you can have something to play with. Start with a crimp tube, and I'm just going to put it on my string. Then I will take a lobster clasp, and I will string it through, and then I will loop it over, see, and then that end, I'm gonna push it through that clasp again. Okay, I don't want to lose too much of my length, so I'm gonna be very cautious of extra material on the end, but not too much. You see how that clasp is closing that? Then I'm going to hold the end that's short, and I'm gonna hold the clasp, and I'm just gonna pull the long end until it's tight. I don't want it too tight to where the lobster clasp doesn't have like movements. So I'll loosen it up a tiny bit. Okay, and then I will take my wire cutters and I will just pinch this closed. Now this is secure. You would do the same thing with the loop part when we're done, but I will show you what it looks like. If this is a little bit too loose, you can always pull the short end or pull the long end and it'll tighten it up. Put a small bead at the end. This is just a little bit of extra security. And if you can, I want you to try to put this both ends into the small bead, because that way it's kind of like an extra lock. Sometimes the wire is thick and you can't do it, and then you would have to like use a bead a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm just gonna add one more bead on here. And now we're at the end of this, and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. Put our clasp on there. This is not elastic. Pull this as tight as possible so you have enough like room to maneuver. Now we're going to put this ring on. When it's tiny like this, you can use your wire cutter to make that, to maneuver the materials. And we're going to make that loop again. Keep pushing it through that, making that loop. Then you pull that little tail back through the clasp. Keep pulling it until it's tight like this. And then you clasp it shut like this. Clasp. So now it's done. See? There you go.
Okay, guys. So here I am at the dollar store in the craft section, and I'll turn the camera around, but you know, if you just want to spend a little bit of money, you can go to the dollar store. But to tell you the truth, even at the craft stores, they're not that pricey, but then sometimes they can be. So let me go over here and show you. See all these different varieties? Like, look at this one. There's glass bead, alphabet letters, cute little pearls, little stars, little circles, these little glass beads. So, you know, you can head to your local neighborhood dollar store or craft store to get these simple supplies. Also, if you get really, here's some wood beads. If you get really creative with it and you start doing it as a full-time hobby, there's little storage containers and stuff so you can keep your beads all separated and your crafts really organized, which I don't have that all the way down, but you know, I like to try to mention that as well.